The cold is not a feeling anymore. It is a presence, a living thing that has consumed me from the outside in, layer by layer, until I cannot remember what warmth felt like. My name is Elara Thorn, and I am dying in the snow, not dramatically, not with gasping breaths or desperate prayers to gods I stopped believing in years ago. I am dying the way forgotten things die, quietly, without witness, without meaning. The snow falls in thick, suffocating curtains around me, and I have stopped trying to move. My legs gave out hours ago. My fingers are black at the tips, and I stopped feeling them sometime after midnight. The irony is that I came to these mountains willingly. I came because I was in love. That seems laughable now. Lying here with my cheek pressed against ice that has begun to feel like a pillow. Love. What a fragile, stupid thing. What a weapon disguised as salvation. His name was Cassius, and he was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. The way a blade catches light before it cuts. I met him at court, where I served as an advisor to the king. I was not born to nobility, but I had earned my place through intelligence and ruthlessness. I had survived where others crumbled. I had learned to read men the way scholars read ancient texts, finding meaning in every pause, every glance, every calculated word. But Cassius was different, or so I believed. He pursued me with an intensity that felt like destiny. He wrote me letters in his own hand, something nobles never did. He found me in the library at midnight and kissed me against the shelves of leather-bound books. He whispered that he had been searching for me his entire life, that I was the only woman who understood him, the only one who could see past the mask he wore for the court. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I was 28 years old, and I had never been loved. I had been desired, certainly. I had been valued for my usefulness. But love, real, consuming, all-encompassing love, had always eluded me. So when Cassius offered it, I took it like a starving woman takes bread. He asked me to run away with him. He said the court was suffocating, that we could disappear into the mountains, that we could build something real, something untouched by politics and lies. He said he wanted to marry me in secret, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life proving his devotion. I said yes. I left behind my position, my reputation, my carefully constructed life. I left behind the only world I had ever known. I packed a single bag and met him at the edge of the city, where the snow was already beginning to fall. The journey into the mountains took 3 days. We rode through forests so dense that daylight became a rumor. We climbed higher and higher until the air itself felt thin and hostile. Cassius was quiet during the ride, but I attributed it to the difficulty of the journey. I told myself that once we reached our destination, once we were safe, he would return to the man who had courted me so passionately. We arrived at a hunting lodge on the 4th day, a sprawling stone structure that seemed to have grown from the mountain itself. It was beautiful and terrible, isolated and perfect. "This is ours," Cassius said, and I believed him. That night, he made love to me with a tenderness that made me weep. I had never felt so seen, so cherished, so completely known. I fell asleep in his arms, my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I woke to the sound of laughter. It was not Cassius's laughter. It was female, high and cruel and utterly devoid of warmth. I opened my eyes to find him gone from the bed, and I wrapped myself in the furs, confused and suddenly afraid. I found them in the main hall of the lodge. Cassius stood with his arm around a woman I recognized immediately, Lady Margot, the king's daughter. She was beautiful in a way that was sharp and cutting, all angles and ice-blue eyes. She was also the woman Cassius had been betrothed to before he met me. The engagement had been broken off, or so he had told me. He said he had ended it to be with me. He had lied. Elara, Cassius said, and his voice was different now. The warmth was gone. In its place was something cold and amused. I'm glad you're awake. I wanted you to understand what was happening before we finished this. Finished what? I asked, though I already knew. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way a hunter looks at prey that has finally realized the trap. Your humiliation, Lady Margot said, stepping forward. Cassius told me everything. How easy you were to seduce. How desperately you wanted to believe that someone could love you. How you abandoned everything for a man you knew for less than a month. The words hit me like physical blows, but it was Cassius's smile that broke something inside me. That smile, the one I had thought was tender, that I had thought was mine, was a mask. It had always been a mask. Why? I whispered. Because you were in the way, Cassius said simply. You had the king's ear. You were becoming too influential. We needed you gone, and we needed you discredited. When you return to the city, if you return, no one will believe a word you say. You'll be the woman who abandoned her position for love, who was seduced and abandoned in the mountains. You'll be a cautionary tale, a joke. I won't return, I said quietly. I'll tell them the truth. Lady Margot laughed. The truth? Who will believe you? You have no witnesses. You have no proof. You have nothing but the word of a desperate woman who was foolish enough to fall for the oldest trick in the world. She was right. I realized it with a clarity that was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I had no one. I had burned every bridge to follow a man who had never existed. The Cassius I loved was a fiction, a character he had played for my benefit. What will you do with me? I asked. Cassius exchanged a glance with Lady Margot, and in that glance, I saw my fate decided. We're going to leave you here, he said. The lodge is stocked with supplies for a few days, but not enough to survive the winter. The nearest village is 3 days a journey down the mountain, but the passes are already closing. By tomorrow, the snow will be too deep to traverse. You can try to make it, if you like. Most people do. They usually make it about a mile before the cold takes them. Or you can stay here and starve slowly, Lady Margot added, her voice bright with anticipation. Either way, you'll be dead within a week, and when they find your body, if they find it, they'll assume you were just another foolish woman who couldn't survive the mountains. They left me there with the clothes on my back and a single candle. I stood in the lodge for a long time after they departed, unable to process what had happened. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that my mind could not quite grasp it. I kept waiting for Cassius to return, to tell me it was all a terrible joke. But he didn't come back. I waited until nightfall, and then I made a decision. I would not die in that lodge. I would not give them the satisfaction of finding my body there, a monument to my own stupidity. If I was going to die, I would die trying. I took what supplies I could carry, a cloak, some bread, a water flask, and I stepped out into the snow. The first day, I walked with purpose. The cold was brutal, but it was also clarifying. It burned away the shock and the grief and the shame, leaving only a hard, crystalline determination. I would reach the village. I would survive. And then I would find a way to make them pay. The second day, the snow began to fall so heavily that I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. I had lost the path hours ago, but I kept walking anyway, trusting that downhill was the right direction. My feet were numb. My fingers were numb. My face was numb. The only thing I could still feel was the burning in my lungs as I struggled to breathe the thin, frozen air. By the third day, I knew I was going to die. The realization came not as a shock, but as a kind of relief. I was so tired. I was so cold. The thought of lying down in the snow and simply closing my eyes seemed like the most reasonable thing in the world. I found a small outcropping of rock and collapsed behind it, out of the worst of the wind. I wrapped the cloak around myself as tightly as I could and waited for the end. The snow continued to fall, covering me inch by inch, layer by layer. I watched it accumulate on my hands, on my cloak, on the world around me. It was almost beautiful, in a way. The snow was erasing me, making me part of the mountain itself. Soon, there would be no trace that I had ever existed. I thought about my mother, who had died when I was young. I thought about the books I had loved to read. I thought about the taste of wine and the feeling of sunlight on my skin. I thought about all the things I would never experience again. And then I thought about Cassius, and I felt a surge of rage so intense that it burned through the cold like a flame. I would not die here. I refused. I tried to stand, but my legs would not obey. I tried to crawl, but my hands were too weak. I lay there in the snow, my body betraying me, my will unable to overcome the simple physics of freezing to death. That was when I felt it. A presence, not a sound, not a touch, but a presence so profound that it seemed to part the snow itself. I opened my eyes, and through the white curtain of falling snow, I saw a figure. He was tall, impossibly tall, and he seemed to absorb the darkness around him rather than stand within it. His face was pale, so pale that it seemed to glow against the snow, and his eyes were ancient. Not old, but ancient. The kind of ancient that comes from centuries of watching the world turn, of seeing empires rise and fall, of accumulating a weight of years that no human should have to carry. He looked at me, and I felt something shift in the universe. He did not move toward me. He did not speak. He simply stood there, watching me with an intensity that was almost unbearable. And in that moment, I understood that this was not a rescue. This was something else entirely. This was a choice. I should have been afraid. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything but remain still under the weight of his gaze. But I was already dying. Fear seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford. "Are you real?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He did not answer. Instead, he moved, not walked, but moved, as if the space between us was something he could simply decide not to cross. One moment he was distant, a figure in the snow. The next, he was kneeling beside me, his pale hand reaching toward my face. I flinched, but I did not pull away. His fingers were cold, colder than the snow, colder than anything I had ever felt. They traced the line of my cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed impossible, given the power I could feel radiating from him. "You are still alive," he said. His voice was like nothing I had ever heard. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the mountain itself was speaking through him. "That is unexpected. I'm dying," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "But not yet, not quite yet." He withdrew his hand, and I felt the loss of it like a physical pain. He stood, and I watched as he looked out at the snow, his expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I was hunting," he said. "And I hunt in these mountains. I have hunted in these mountains for longer than your kingdom has existed. But I have never found prey like you." "Prey?" I repeated. And now the fear did come, sharp and immediate. He turned back to me, and his eyes caught the fading light in a way that made them seem to glow red. "You are suffering," he said. "I can taste it in the air. It is exquisite. Most people who die in the snow die with resignation or despair. But you are dying with rage. You are dying with a hunger for vengeance that is almost as strong as your will to survive. It is intoxicating." I understood then what he was. I had read enough old stories, heard enough whispers in the dark corners of the courtyard to know what stood before me. "You're a vampire," I said. "I am many things," he replied. "Vampire is what your kind calls creatures like me. It is a crude word, but it will suffice." He knelt beside me again, and this time I could see the full horror of what he was. His skin was too pale, too perfect, like marble that had been carved by a master sculptor. His eyes were too knowing, too ancient, and his mouth, when he smiled, I could see the tips of fangs, white and sharp as needles. "I could end your suffering," he said. "I could drain you here in the snow, and you would feel nothing but relief. Or I could leave you, and you could continue to freeze, slowly, agonizingly, for hours yet to come. Or," he paused, and in that pause, I felt the weight of centuries. "Or I could save you," he finished, "but not gently, not kindly. If I save you, it will be because I choose to, and you will owe me a debt that you can never repay. You will be bound to me in ways that you cannot yet comprehend. You will become something other than human. You will become like me." "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Because I am curious," he said simply. "Because in all my years, and there have been many years, I have never encountered a human who burned with such intensity. Most of your kind are so fragile, so easily broken. But you are still raging even as you freeze. I want to see what you become if I give you the strength to survive." He reached out and took my wrist. His grip was not gentle, but it was not cruel either. It was simply absolute, the grip of something that could crush bone as easily as crushing glass, but chose not to. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elara," I whispered. "Elara," he repeated. And the way he said it made it sound like a curse and a blessing all at once. "I am Theron, and I am going to save you, Elara. But first, I am going to hurt you. I am going to hurt you in ways that you cannot imagine. And you are going to thank me for it." Before I could respond, he pulled me against him, and I felt the full force of his strength. It was like being caught in the grip of a stone statue, immovable and eternal. He tilted my head back, exposing my throat, and I felt the sharp sting of his fangs piercing my skin. The pain was extraordinary. It was not the clean, quick pain of a blade. It was a deep, burning agony that seemed to radiate from the wound outward, consuming everything in its path. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I tried to pull away, but I was held fast. And then, something changed. The pain transformed into something else, something that was almost pleasure. It was as if he was drawing not just my blood, but my very essence, my suffering, my rage, my desperate will to survive. With each pull, I felt lighter, as if he was taking away the weight of everything that had happened to me. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace. He drank from me for what felt like an eternity, and no time at all. The world began to fade, the snow and the darkness and the cold all becoming distant and unreal. I was floating, drifting, becoming nothing. And then he stopped. He pulled away from me, and I felt the loss of him like a wound. I opened my eyes to find him looking at me with an expression I could not read. "You are dying," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I managed to say. He raised his wrist to his mouth and bit down, hard, blood, dark and ancient and impossibly vital, welled from the wound. He pressed it to my lips. "Drink," he commanded. I did not have the strength to refuse. I drank, and it was like drinking fire and starlight and the essence of the earth itself. It burned through me, consuming the cold, burning away the frostbite, knitting together the damage that the snow had done to my body. I drank until I could not drink anymore, and then I collapsed into darkness. I woke in a bed of black silk, in a room lit by a single candle. For a long moment, I simply lay there, trying to understand what had happened. My body felt strange, lighter and heavier at the same time, as if I had been remade from some material that was not quite human. I could feel every thread of the silk beneath me, could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, or what should have been my heartbeat. Instead, there was only silence where my pulse should have been. I sat up slowly, and the world came into focus with a clarity that was almost painful. I could see every detail of the room, the grain of the wood in the floorboards, the individual threads in the tapestries that hung on the walls, the dust motes floating in the candlelight. I could smell things I had never smelled before, the iron in the candle wax, the age of the stone walls, the faint scent of blood that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I looked down at my hands and barely recognized them. They were pale, almost translucent, and when I moved them, they seemed to move with a grace that was not my own. I touched my face and felt the sharp angles of cheekbones that had not been there before. I opened my mouth and felt the tips of fangs where my canines should have been. I was no longer human. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of rightness, as if I had been incomplete before and was only now becoming whole. The door to the room opened, and Theron entered. He was dressed in black, a long coat that seemed to absorb the light, and he moved with a predatory grace that made my new instincts scream at me to either flee or submit. I did neither. I simply watched him, trying to understand what I had become. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. And my voice was different now, deeper, with an undertone that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. "What have you done to me?" "I have given you a choice," he said. "You were dying. Now you are not. You are something new. Something stronger. Something that will not break as easily as humans break." He moved to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. Outside, I could see the mountains, and beyond them, the world I had left behind. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to move toward the light. My body tensed, ready to run toward it, to feel the warmth on my skin. Theron's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, pulling me back into the shadows. "No," he said, and his voice was absolute. "The sun will burn you now. Your skin will blister and char. You will be in agony. You will not go into the sunlight." I stared at him, and the reality of what I had become crashed down on me like an avalanche. I was a creature of darkness now. I could not walk in daylight. I could not feel the sun on my face. I could not live the life I had lived before. "How long?" I asked. "How long will I live like this?" "Forever," Theron said simply, "or until someone stronger than you decides to end you. But that is unlikely. You are mine now, and I do not share what is mine." There was something possessive in the way he said it, something that should have made me angry. But instead, I felt a strange sense of comfort. I had spent my entire life fighting to survive, fighting to matter, fighting to be seen. And now, for the first time, I was truly seen. I was truly valued. I was truly owned. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I'm hungry," I said. And the moment the words left my mouth, I understood what I was hungry for. It was not food. It was blood. "Yes," Theron said. "That hunger will never leave you. It will fade with time, but it will always be there, a constant companion. You will learn to manage it, or it will consume you. How do I manage it? You hunt, he said, or you feed from those who offer themselves willingly, or you starve. The choice is yours. He released my wrist and moved toward the door. Rest today. Tomorrow night, I will teach you what you need to know to survive in this new world. But for now, you should sleep. The transformation takes much from the body, even a body that is no longer quite human. Wait, I said, and he paused at the threshold. Why did you save me? Really? He turned back to me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in those ancient eyes, something that might have been loneliness or regret, or simply the weight of centuries. Because you were burning, he said, and I had forgotten what it felt like to burn. Then he was gone, and I was alone in the room with the rising sun and the hunger that clawed at my throat. The days that followed were a blur of darkness and discovery. Theron's home was vast, a sprawling estate hidden deep in the mountains, built into the stone itself. There were rooms I never entered, corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, libraries filled with books in languages I did not recognize. It was a place that existed outside of time, untouched by the world beyond its walls, and it was a prison. Not because Theron kept me locked away. He did not. I was free to wander the halls, free to explore the grounds after sunset, but I was a prisoner nonetheless, bound by the hunger that consumed me and the knowledge that I could not survive in the world beyond these walls. The sun would kill me. The hunger would drive me mad. I was dependent on Theron for everything, for shelter, for guidance, for the knowledge I needed to survive. He was a patient teacher, but not a kind one. On the first night after my transformation, he took me hunting. We moved through the forest like ghosts, silent and swift. My new body responded to my will in ways that my human body never had. I could run faster than I had ever thought possible, could climb trees and scale cliffs with ease. My senses were heightened to an almost unbearable degree. I could hear the heartbeat of every creature in the forest, could smell the blood in their veins. There, Theron said, pointing to a deer that was grazing in a clearing. Feed. I hesitated. The hunger was overwhelming, a constant roar in my mind that demanded satisfaction. But the thought of killing something, of taking a life, made me recoil. I can't, I said. You can, Theron replied, and you will. The hunger will not allow you to refuse forever. Better to embrace it now, while you still have some control, than to wait until it consumes you entirely. He was right. I could feel the hunger growing, spreading through my body like a poison. My vision began to blur at the edges, and all I could see was the deer. All I could hear was the steady thump of its heart. I moved before I could think about it, my body acting on instinct. The deer tried to run, but I was faster. I brought it down, and my fangs found its throat. The blood was warm and vital and absolutely intoxicating. It flooded through me, and for a moment, the hunger was satisfied. When it was over, I stood over the corpse of the deer, covered in blood, and I felt something break inside me. I'm a monster, I whispered. Yes, Theron said, and there was no judgment in his voice. You are. We all are. The question is whether you will accept what you are, or whether you will spend eternity fighting against your own nature. Over the following weeks, I learned to hunt. I learned to move through the darkness with purpose. I learned to read the signs that told me where prey could be found. I learned to kill without hesitation, without mercy, without regret. And slowly, I began to understand that Theron was right. I was a monster, but I was also more alive than I had ever been. During the day, while the sun burned outside and I was forced to remain in the darkness, Theron taught me other things. He taught me the history of his kind, the ancient bloodlines, the wars that had been fought in the shadows of human civilization, the rules that governed our existence. He taught me that there were others like us, scattered across the world, each with their own territory, their own rules, their own hunger. He taught me that I was now bound to him, that I bore his mark, that any vampire who encountered me would know that I belonged to him. And he taught me that this was both a protection and a curse. There are those who would kill you simply because you are young and weak, he said. There are those who would enslave you, use you as a tool for their own purposes, but they will not touch you, because you are mine. My mark protects you. And what do I owe you in return? I asked. He was silent for a long moment. We were in his study, surrounded by books and maps and artifacts that seemed to span centuries. A fire burned in the hearth, and I sat as close to it as I dared, drawn to the warmth, even though I could no longer feel it. Obedience, he said finally. Loyalty. Your presence. That is all I require. For how long? I asked. And for as long as you wish to remain, he said. You are not my slave, Elara. You are free to leave whenever you choose. But know that if you leave, you will be alone. You will be hunted. You will be prey, and you will likely not survive. It was not a threat. It was simply the truth. I remained. The weeks turned into months, and the months turned into a year. I learned the rhythms of this new life, the darkness of the day, the freedom of the night, the constant hunger that was always present but could be managed, controlled, directed. And slowly, something began to change between Theron and me. It was not love. I was not naive enough to believe in love anymore. But it was something. A connection that went deeper than words. A bond that was forged in blood and darkness, and the shared understanding of what we were. He would find me in the library at night, reading by candlelight, and he would sit across from me in silence. We would not speak, but the silence was not empty. It was full of meaning, of understanding, of a communication that existed beyond language. He would watch me hunt, and I would feel his gaze on me like a physical touch. There was something in the way he looked at me, something that was not quite approval, but something close to it. Something that suggested he saw in me a reflection of himself, a kindred spirit in the darkness. And I found myself drawn to him in ways that I did not fully understand. It was not the attraction I had felt for Cassius. That had been a surface thing, a desire for the idea of love rather than love itself. This was different. This was a hunger that was almost as intense as the hunger for blood. It was a need to be close to him, to understand him, to know the secrets that lay behind those ancient eyes. But he kept me at a distance. He would allow me to sit near him, but he would not touch me. He would speak to me, but his words were always measured, always controlled. He was a wall of stone, impenetrable and eternal. And I was left on the outside, pressing my hands against the cold surface, trying to find a way in. One night, I asked him why. We were in the courtyard of his estate, standing beneath a sky full of stars. The night was clear and cold, and I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on me from above. "Why do you keep me at a distance?" I asked. He did not answer immediately. He simply stood there, looking up at the stars, and I wondered if he was even going to respond. "Because I am afraid," he said finally, and the words seemed to cost him something. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "Of what I might do to you," he said. "I have lived for so long, Elara. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched humans age and die, over and over again. I have learned not to care, because caring only brings pain. But you..." He turned to look at me, and I saw something raw in his expression. "You are different. You are like me now. But you are still so new, so fragile in your own way. And I am afraid that if I allow myself to feel what I am beginning to feel, I will destroy you." "I'm not fragile," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you are still learning what you are, and I am ancient and broken and full of darkness. If I were to let you in, if I were to allow myself to love you, I would consume you. I would make you into something even darker than you already are." "Maybe that's what I want," I said. He reached out and touched my face, and it was the first time he had touched me since the night he saved me. His fingers were cold against my skin, but they burned. "No," he said. "You don't. You want to believe that you do, but you don't. You still have hope, Elara. You still believe that there is something good in this world, something worth fighting for. I cannot take that from you. I will not." He withdrew his hand, and I felt the loss of it like a physical pain. "But I'm changing," I said. "Every day, I feel myself becoming something darker. The hunger is consuming me. The rage is consuming me. Soon, there will be nothing left of the woman I was." "Yes," Theron said. "That is the nature of what we are. We are creatures of darkness, and darkness consumes everything eventually. But you still have time. You still have the choice to hold on to some part of your humanity, some part of your hope. And I will not be the one to take that from you." He turned away from me, and I knew that the conversation was over. But something had shifted. In admitting his fear, in touching me, in allowing me to see even a glimpse of the vulnerability that lay beneath his ancient exterior, he had changed something fundamental between us. The distance remained, but it was no longer absolute. It was a distance that was chosen, maintained with effort, held in place by his will alone. And I began to understand that his distance was not rejection. It was protection, protection of me, and protection of himself from the intensity of what he was beginning to feel. 2 years after my transformation, Theron told me the truth. We were in his study, surrounded by maps and documents and artifacts that spanned centuries. He had been showing me the history of his bloodline, the genealogy of his kind, the wars that had been fought in the shadows of human civilization. "Why are you telling me all of this?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because you need to understand what you are," he said, "and because I need you to understand why I chose you." He pulled out a leather journal, ancient and worn, and opened it to a page filled with his handwriting. The script was elegant but harsh, written with a precision that suggested it had been done with great care. "I have lived for 873 years, he said. "In all that time, I have encountered thousands of humans. Most of them were forgettable. They lived their brief lives and died, and I moved on. Some of them were interesting enough to remember. A few of them were remarkable enough to bring into my world and make into something like myself." He turned the pages of the journal, and I saw names written there, dozens of them, hundreds of them. Each name was followed by dates, by notes, by what seemed to be observations about the person. "I have made many mistakes," Theron continued. "I have turned people who were weak, who could not handle the transformation, who went mad with the hunger. I have turned people who were cruel, who used their new power to inflict suffering on others. I have turned people who I thought I loved, only to watch them betray me or abandon me or simply fade away into the darkness." He stopped at a particular page, and I saw my name written there. But it was not recent. The date next to my name was from 3 years ago, before I had even met Cassius, before I had even come to the mountains. "I have been watching you for a long time," Theron said. "Long before you arrived at the hunting lodge. I have been watching you since you first came to the capital, since you first began to make a name for yourself at court." I felt a chill run through me. "Why?" "Because I saw something in you," he said. Something that I had not seen in centuries. You were intelligent? Yes. You were ambitious? Yes. But more than that, you were a survivor. You had nothing. No family, no connections, no advantages, and yet you clawed your way to a position of power through sheer force of will. You were willing to do whatever it took to survive, to matter, to be seen. He closed the journal and looked at me directly. I have learned, over the centuries, that the only humans worth turning are those who have already proven that they can survive. Most people, when faced with true hardship, break. They give up. They accept their fate. But you were different. You fought. You raged. You refused to accept that your life was over. So you orchestrated my abandonment, I said, and it was not a question. No, Theron said. I did not orchestrate it, but I knew it was coming. I have contacts in the capital, people who report to me about the movements of the nobility. When I learned that Cassius was planning to seduce you and abandon you, I made a decision. I decided that if you survived the mountains, if you made it through the snow and the cold and the hunger, then you would be worthy of transformation. And if I hadn't survived, I asked, then you would have died, and I would have moved on. He said simply. I would have found someone else, or I would have waited for the next person who proved themselves worthy. But you did survive. You survived long enough for me to find you, and in that moment, I knew that I had made the right choice. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. I felt betrayed, but I also felt something else, a strange sense of rightness, as if everything that had happened to me had been leading to this moment. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you needed to believe that your transformation was a choice, he said. You needed to believe that you had agency in what happened to you. If I had told you that I had been watching you, that I had allowed you to suffer because I wanted to test your worthiness, you would have hated me, and I could not bear that. I turned back to face him. I do hate you, I said. I hate you for watching me suffer. I hate you for allowing Cassius to betray me. I hate you for manipulating my life. I know, he said. And you are right to hate me. I am ancient and cruel, and I have done terrible things. But I also saved you. I gave you a choice, to die in the snow, or to become something greater than you ever could have been as a human. And you chose to become something greater. I didn't choose, I said. You chose for me. Yes, he agreed. I did, and I would do it again. There was something in the way he said it that made me understand that this was not cruelty. It was simply the way he was, ancient and removed from human morality, operating according to a code that I did not fully understand. I should have left him then. I should have walked away from him and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I asked him the question that had been burning in my mind since the night he saved me. Do you love me? I asked. He was silent for a long moment. The candlelight flickered across his face, casting shadows that made him look even more ancient than he was. Yes, he said finally. I love you. And that is why I keep my distance. Because if I allow myself to love you fully, if I allow myself to be consumed by that love, I will destroy you. I will make you into something even darker than I am, and I cannot do that. I will not. What if I want to be destroyed? I asked. What if I want to be consumed? Then you are not yet ready, he said, and I will wait until you are. 3 more years passed. I learned everything that Theron had to teach me. I learned to hunt with precision and grace. I learned to move through the world without being seen. I learned to read people, to understand their desires and fears, to manipulate them if necessary. I learned to survive in a world that was fundamentally hostile to my existence, and I learned to love him. It was not the passionate, consuming love that I had felt for Cassius. It was something deeper and more complex. A love that was built on understanding, on shared darkness, on the knowledge that we were the only two creatures in the world who could truly comprehend what the other was. But he maintained his distance. He would allow me to sit close to him, to touch his hand, to rest my head on his shoulder. But he would not allow me to kiss him. He would not allow me to take him to bed. He maintained a wall between us that was absolute and unbreakable. It was maddening. One night, I confronted him about it. "Why do you torture me like this?" I demanded. "Why do you allow me to feel this way about you, and then refuse to reciprocate?" "Because I am protecting you," he said. "I don't want to be protected," I said. "I want to be loved. I want to be consumed. I want to be destroyed." "No," he said. "You want to believe that you do, but you are still holding on to something, some part of your humanity, some part of your hope, and I will not be the one to take that from you." "It's already gone," I said. "Can't you see that? I'm not human anymore. I'm not even close to human. I'm a monster just like you, and I'm tired of pretending that I'm not." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his ancient eyes, something that might have been despair. "If I take you," he said, "if I allow myself to love you the way I want to love you, there will be no going back. You will be bound to me in ways that you cannot escape. You will become part of me, and I will become part of you. And when I eventually die, and I will die, Elara, because nothing lasts forever, you will die with me. You will not survive my death. Then we will die together," I said. "And that will be enough." He reached out and pulled me against him, and for the first time, he kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate and full of a hunger that went far beyond the physical. It was a kiss that contained centuries of loneliness, of isolation, of the weight of being the only one of his kind who had survived this long. And I kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring into that kiss all of the love and rage and desire that I had been holding back for 5 years. When we finally broke apart, I was trembling. "I love you," I said. "I have loved you since the moment you saved me in the snow. I will love you until the end of time." "I know," he said, "and I love you. God help me, I love you." That night, he took me to his bed, and we made love with a passion that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. It was not gentle or tender. It was raw and primal, and absolutely consuming. It was the love of two creatures who had been alone for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be truly seen, truly known, truly loved. And when it was over, I felt something shift inside me. It was as if a door that had been locked for 5 years had finally opened. I could feel Theron's presence in my mind, his thoughts bleeding into mine, his emotions becoming my emotions. It was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely perfect. "What's happening?" I whispered. "You are becoming one with me," he said. "This is what happens when two ancient vampires love each other completely. We become bonded, connected in ways that are deeper than words can express. You will be able to feel my presence always. You will know my thoughts, my emotions, my desires, and I will know yours." "Will it hurt?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "But it will also be the most beautiful thing you have ever experienced." He was right. Over the following weeks, the bond between us deepened. I could feel him in my mind at all times, a constant presence that was both comforting and overwhelming. I could sense his emotions, his thoughts, his desires, and he could sense mine. It was as if we had become two halves of a single being. But something else was happening as well. I could feel myself changing, transforming into something even darker and more powerful than I had been before. The hunger was still there, but it was different now. It was no longer a desperate need, but a controlled force that I could direct and manipulate. My strength increased, my speed increased, my senses became even more acute, and my rage became something that was almost tangible, a force that I could feel building inside me like a storm. "What's happening to me?" I asked Theron one night. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be," he said. "You are becoming a true vampire, not a fledgling, not a servant, but a creature of power and darkness. You are becoming my equal." "How long will it take?" I asked. "A year," he said. "Perhaps 2. But when it is complete, you will be unstoppable. You will be able to walk in the sunlight for brief periods. You will be able to survive without feeding for months at a time. You will be able to do things that most vampires can only dream of." "And then?" I asked. "And then," he said, "you will be ready." "Ready for what?" He did not answer. But I could feel the answer in his mind, bleeding through the bond that connected us. I was ready for revenge. 7 years after my transformation, I returned to the capital. I did not go alone. Theron came with me, though he remained in the shadows, watching from a distance. He had taught me that the greatest power was not in the display of strength, but in the subtle manipulation of fear. The city had changed in the years that I had been gone. New buildings had been constructed. Old ones had crumbled. The people I had known had aged, or died, or moved on to other places. But the court remained, and the people who had destroyed me remained. Cassius was still there, still playing his games, still seducing women and abandoning them. He had married Lady Margot, and they had become one of the most powerful couples in the kingdom. They had a daughter now, a girl of 5 years old, who had her mother's ice-blue eyes and her father's cruel smile. I watched them for weeks before I made my move. I did not approach them with rage or violence. I approached them with something far more dangerous. I approached them with calm. I appeared at a ball at the palace, dressed in a gown of black silk that seemed to absorb the light. I had used my power to make myself appear as I had been before my transformation. Beautiful, human, alive. Only my eyes betrayed what I had become. They were ancient and knowing, and full of a darkness that could not be hidden. The moment Cassius saw me, he went pale. "Elara," he whispered, and I could feel his fear like a physical thing. "You're alive." "How are you alive?" "I am many things now," I said, and my voice was calm and measured. But alive is perhaps not the most accurate description. I am something far greater than alive. I could feel the bond with Theron, could feel his presence at the edge of the ballroom, watching, waiting. I could feel his approval, his pride, his love. "What do you want?" Cassius asked, and he was backing away from me now, his hand reaching for the sword at his side. "I want you to understand," I said. "I want you to understand what you did to me. I want you to understand the suffering you caused, and I want you to understand that there are consequences for your actions." "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice was shaking. "You were a fool who fell for a simple trick. You deserved what happened to you." I smiled, and I let him see my fangs. His scream echoed through the ballroom, and within moments, the entire court was in chaos. Guards rushed toward me, but I did not move. I simply stood there, watching as Cassius tried to run, watching as he stumbled and fell, watching as he crawled away from me like a child. I could have killed him then. It would have been easy. One moment, and he would have been nothing but a corpse on the marble floor of the ballroom. But I did not kill him. Instead, I walked toward him, and I spoke words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "You thought you destroyed me," I said. "You thought that abandoning me in the snow would break me, would erase me, would make me nothing. But you were wrong. You did not destroy me. You transformed me. You made me into something that you could never be. Something powerful. Something eternal. Something that will exist long after you have turned to dust." I leaned down and whispered in his ear, words that only he could hear. "I could kill you now," I said. "I could drain every drop of blood from your body and leave you as nothing but an empty husk. But I won't. Because that would be mercy, and you do not deserve mercy. Instead, I will let you live. I will let you spend the rest of your life knowing that I am out there, that I am watching you, that I could end you at any moment. I will let you live with the knowledge that you created something that you could never destroy." I stood up and turned to face the guards who were advancing toward me. They stopped, frozen by the power that radiated from me, by the ancient darkness that surrounded me like a cloak. "I am leaving now," I said. "And if any of you try to stop me, I will kill you. Not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly and painfully. I will make you understand what true suffering is." They did not try to stop me. I walked out of the ballroom, and I could feel Theron's presence moving with me, could feel his approval, could feel his love. But I was not finished. Lady Margot was in her chambers, putting her daughter to bed. I appeared in the doorway, and she looked up, her face going white as she recognized me. "You," she breathed. "Yes," I said. "Me." I did not touch her. I did not need to. I simply looked at her, and I let her see what I had become. I let her feel the weight of my power, the ancient darkness that surrounded me. "Your daughter," I said, "will grow up knowing that her mother was a coward. She will grow up knowing that her mother conspired to destroy an innocent woman, and that her mother was too weak to face the consequences of her actions. She will grow up ashamed of you." "Please," Lady Margot whispered, "please don't hurt her." "I will not hurt her," I said. "She is innocent. But you will live with the knowledge of what you did. You will live with the knowledge that you created something that you could never destroy. And you will live with the knowledge that I am out there, watching, waiting, and that I could end you at any moment." I turned to leave, but I paused at the door. "One more thing," I said. "Tell Cassius that I am not the woman he abandoned in the snow. I am something far greater. I am something far darker. And I am eternal." Then I was gone, disappearing into the night like a ghost. I did not return to the capital after that night. There was no need. I had accomplished what I had set out to do. I had shown Cassius and Lady Margot that I was no longer the woman they had destroyed. I had shown them that their actions had consequences, even if those consequences were not death. Theron and I returned to his estate in the mountains, and we settled into a life that was neither human nor entirely vampire. We existed in the spaces between worlds, in the darkness that most humans could not perceive. The years passed, and I continued to transform. By the 10th year after my return to the capital, I was no longer recognizable as the woman I had been. I was ancient and powerful and absolutely terrifying. I could walk in the sunlight for hours at a time, though it burned my skin and caused me pain. I could survive without feeding for months. I could do things that most vampires could only dream of, and I was happy. It was not the happiness that I had known as a human, that had been a fragile, fleeting thing, dependent on external circumstances and the approval of others. This was a deeper happiness, a satisfaction that came from knowing exactly what I was and accepting it completely. I was a monster. I was a creature of darkness. I was a predator and a killer and a being of immense power, and I was loved. Theron and I existed in a state of perfect understanding. We did not need words to communicate. We did not need physical touch to feel connected. We were bonded in ways that went beyond the physical, beyond the emotional, into something that was almost spiritual. We hunted together, moving through the night like shadows. We read together, surrounded by books that spanned centuries. We made love with a passion that never diminished, that only grew stronger with each passing year. And we waited. We waited for the day when Cassius would die. We waited for the day when Lady Margot would pass from this world. We waited for the day when the people who had destroyed me would finally face the consequences of their actions. But I did not wait passively. I had learned over the years that the greatest power was not in the display of strength, but in the subtle manipulation of events. I had contacts in the capital, people who reported to me about the movements of the nobility, about the secrets that were hidden behind closed doors. I learned that Cassius had become paranoid, that he saw threats everywhere, that he had begun to drink heavily to cope with the knowledge that I was out there, watching. I learned that his marriage to Lady Margot had become a cold and bitter thing, that they barely spoke to each other anymore. I learned that their daughter had grown up to be a kind and compassionate woman, nothing like her parents. And I took satisfaction in knowing that she would grow up ashamed of them, that she would spend her life trying to atone for the sins of her mother and father. 20 years after my return to the capital, Cassius died. He did not die at my hands. He died of a heart attack, brought on by years of paranoia and fear and heavy drinking. He died alone in his chambers, and his body was not discovered for 3 days. I felt no satisfaction at his death. He had already been destroyed by the knowledge that I existed, that I was watching, that I could end him at any moment. His death was simply the final punctuation mark on a sentence that had been written long ago. Lady Margot lived for another 10 years after that. She became a recluse, rarely leaving her chambers, spending her days in a state of paranoid delusion. She died in her sleep, and I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction at the knowledge that she had spent the last years of her life in fear. And I was free. Not free from the hunger. That would never leave me. Not free from the darkness. That was part of me now, woven into the very fabric of my being. But free from the need for revenge. Free from the rage that had driven me for so long. I had become what I had set out to become. I had transformed from a broken, abandoned woman into something powerful and eternal. I had taken the suffering that had been inflicted upon me and transformed it into strength. And I had done it all with Theron by my side. I stand at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the world below. It has been 50 years since I returned to the capital. 50 years since I faced Cassius and Lady Margot and showed them what I had become. 50 years since I truly became myself. The world has changed in those 50 years. Empires have risen and fallen. Technology has advanced in ways that would have seemed like magic to the people I knew in my human life. But I have remained the same, eternal, unchanging, existing in the spaces between worlds. Theron stands beside me, his hand in mine. We do not speak. We do not need to. The bond between us is so complete, so absolute, that words are almost superfluous. Do you regret it? He asks, and his voice is soft in the darkness. No, I say. I do not regret anything. Not the suffering, not the transformation, not the revenge. All of it was necessary. All of it was part of my journey to become what I am now. And what are you now? He asks. I consider the question for a long moment. I am a survivor, I say finally. I am a creature of darkness and power. I am a woman who was abandoned and left to die, and who rose from that death to become something greater than I ever could have been as a human. I am eternal. I am unstoppable. I am free. I turn to face him, and I see the reflection of the stars in his ancient eyes. And I am loved, I say. by the only being in this world who truly understands what I am. That is the greatest transformation of all. He pulls me close, and we stand together at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the world that will continue to turn long after we are gone. We are creatures of the eternal night, and we will exist in the darkness for as long as the world exists. And that is enough. That is more than enough. It is everything.